Well, maybe help's not on the way after all.
We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or an execution or executions. So I've been told that on good authority. We'll find out about it.
Donald Trump has started his Wednesday pondering military strikes before pouring cold water on the concept, even expressing doubts that Iranians would accept as leader the late Shah's son. More on that with our panel. In a sign of how fast a news cycle can flip, Iran's foreign minister expressing his assurances in English on Trump-friendly Fox News. After a ruthless response to nationwide protests, has the Islamic Republic once again seen off an existential challenge? After a third night of reported quiet in the capital, Tehran, the internet still restricted. It's been 1 week. The death toll still mounting, while the same economic woes weigh heavier than ever on citizens. What lessons do Iranians draw? What comes of this latest show of defiance by the people? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking why Donald Trump has dialed down threats of strikes on Iran. With us from Washington, Iranian-American journalist Negar Mortazavi. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
From Turin in Italy, Amir Rashidi, Director of Cybersecurity and Digital Rights at the Mian Group, which advocates for human rights inside of Iran. Welcome to the show.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Bonne année, Happy New Year to Hélène Conway-Mouret, French Senator, Socialist Vice Chair of the Senate's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committees.
Hello, and Happy New Year to you too.
And Peyman Azmoudeh, Senior Consultant at Risk Management Consultants, Forward Global. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
You can listen, like, and subscribe to the France 24 debate wherever podcasts are streamed. He's a 26-year-old arrested during protests in Karaj. That's a city west of the capital, Tehran. The Iranian judiciary flatly denying that it intended to sentence Irfan Soltani to death, now stating that the charge was propaganda against Iran's Islamic system. The punishment, according to law, will be imprisonment, as the death penalty does not exist for such charges, end quote. A close relative, who does not want to reveal her name, spoke to France 24's Bahar McCoy.
The last news I had was that Irfan's death sentence was supposed to be pronounced yesterday. His parents were on their way to the prison, but the sentence wasn't carried out. We are asking the international community to put maximum pressure on Iran and Trump to help restore internet access in Iran so the voice of Iranians can be heard. Many young people in prison are being tortured. Irfan is still imprisoned, and I will not be silent. I will be his voice until he is free. Irfan must be freed. Irfan was just a protester, and he shouldn't be imprisoned for that. He must be freed.
Peyman Azmoudeh, this young man has sort of become the face of the protesters in the last 24 hours. Your thoughts on these competing narratives?
So, first of all, I just want to express my relief that in this one case, it appears that the authorities have done what they usually do when they're faced with international pressure for a specific case, is they'll back down at least momentarily. I think what's really important for us to remember is that Irfan Soltani is one of tens of thousands of people who've been arrested over the course of these protests. The latest number I saw was 18,000. That is definitely an undercount. And it's the same pattern that we saw during the Women Life Freedom protests in 2022, and basically kind of every cycle of contestation that we've had before. And frankly, even outside protest movements, if you look at numbers from the Abdurrahman Buruman Foundation, for example, last year, the Islamic Republic executed over 2,000 people. That is just a constant cycle of violence and murder, essentially. And so what they will do is, when the international community speaks out about one specific case, and in Irfan Soltani's case, fortunately that pressure apparently had an impact, but I'm just really concerned about all of the other people who've been arrested and whose families do not know where they are. who have been kept incommunicado, and especially given what we saw last time in 2022, people being taken to black sites, essentially. So this is what they do when they run out of space in the prisons, is they take warehouses, random buildings, places that frankly are off the grid. They hold people there, they torture them. We had many reports of rape and sexual assault. And frankly, I don't think those people are in the clear in any way.
Are not in the clear, despite that assurance from the foreign minister that there would be no hangings today, no hangings tomorrow. Amir Rashidi, it was exactly 1 week ago we were in this very set speaking with Iranians like yourself who were monitoring the situation when they first told us that, wow, our WhatsApp messages are not getting that second tick to show that the person's received the message. Can you give us an update first on how restricted the internet has been this Thursday and what you're hearing, picking up on what you just heard there from Payman?
Sure. First of all, let me tell you, I'm not using the word internet shutdown since 4 or 5 days ago anymore. This is communication shutdown. When you don't have a reception antenna on your mobile phone, when you are not able to make a phone call from outside to inside, outside, or even sometimes, maybe in some hours, we cannot even make a phone call inside the country. This is not about the internet anymore. This is about communication. Communication is being shut down. And a lot of people, as you said, Payman said, has been killed in the streets. And I'm not really optimistic. Maybe President Trump is optimistic that there won't be execution. But based on my experience being Iranian, living in Iran, and for a while in exile outside Iran, there is no guarantee you can get a promise from the Iranian government when it comes to execution.
No guarantee. And again, just to tell us, are you able to get through this Thursday any better than the previous days?
A little bit better. You see, sometimes since yesterday, sometimes people can make a phone call outside, but this again, it's not like the whole day. If you're lucky, you can make that call, but there is no guarantee, as I said. So still, we are in a state of communication shutdown.
All right, and you were saying there that you're not optimistic when it comes to the pronouncements that we heard from Donald Trump at the outset of this program. The tone changed quickly in Tehran Wednesday, just hours after the head of the judiciary had hinted at fast-tracking trials and executions. He'd stated, "We must act quickly if we want to do anything." Those were his words. Then later, the foreign minister assuring Fox News there would be no hanging today or tomorrow.
President Trump has said that if there are killings, he would intervene. And they wanted to drag him into this conflict. And that was exactly an Israeli plot. They wanted to drag the president of the United States in this conflict. So they started to increase the number of deaths by killing ordinary people, by killing police officers, by starting a kind of, fighting inside the different cities.
Negar Mortazavi, how did that interview go down, and what do you make of it?
It's very unprecedented. It's essentially the Iranian state attempting to speak to Donald Trump directly. We haven't seen anything like this. It's known that President Trump's a television watcher, specifically Fox News. He cares about what's said on Fox News and what his base watches on Fox News, and a lot of his supporters. And so I think this was an attempt by the top Iranian diplomat in English to speak directly to the president. And also, I think the hope is to connect to his base, if we can call it the MAGA base, or the more restricted or skeptical of U.S. military interventions in the region, of endless wars in the Middle East, and an engagement, military engagement with Iran could potentially lead to something that the base would just be supportive of.
What do you make of this sort of flipping of the script? Remember that, again, 24 hours ago at this time, we were talking about the U.S. Withdrawing non-essential personnel from their largest base in the region, Al Udeid in Qatar.
Correct. So we saw the Iranians essentially threaten back when the threats came from President Trump. Initially, his first post was that the U.S. is locked and loaded, which implied potential military threats. And the Iranians also publicly, as we hear, also privately in back channels, started threatening the U.S. You have this parliament and other senior officials essentially saying if the U.S. or Israel attacks them, they're going to attack back. That U.S. bases across the region are all going to be seen as legitimate target. Qatar is one of the main ones, like you said, the largest base. And that even if the U.S. attacks, Israel will be attacked. And Iran did hit back in June when Israel attacked them in the U.S. And so I think that threat is being taken seriously by some of the neighbors who want no part in a conflict like this. We know the Arab countries across the Persian Gulf want stability. They don't want any kind of military chaos, which is going to impact them. The Iraqis are worried. The Turks are worried. So I think sort of regional diplomacy and pressure may have also added a layer to this administration. And also, just to begin with, I'm not sure President Trump really wanted this kind of military action. And you can't tell when a threat is an actual threat or if it's just rhetoric, because he's done this and changed his mind many times before. It's also hard to think that the well-being of Iranian protesters or the freedom of speech, freedom of protest is really the main concern here.
Yeah, a couple of important points you make there. Before I turn to Senator Conway Mouet, let me ask you, Peyman Azmudeh, listening to what Negar just said, is it Donald Trump kind of changing his mind, or is it because we saw pointed statements from the likes of Saudi Arabia on Wednesday that said, hey, if there are strikes, we're not involved. We want no part of this. Was it the pressure from Gulf friends of Trump, or was it Trump himself who got convinced by what he watched on Fox News?
So what I will say is Donald Trump put himself forward unsolicited at the start multiple times on this front. He made multiple threats on Truth Social. He said clearly multiple times, if the Iranian government shoots protesters, I will shoot them back, essentially. And then the Iranian government went and shot tens of thousands of protesters based on all of the information that's coming into us. So for Donald Trump to do this today, frankly, I would be very, very surprised if this is the end of it. Because at the end of the day, if that's all it took, basically, for Donald Trump to just change his mind and say, actually, never mind, that's a humiliation. And Donald Trump does not appreciate being... Unless it's Vladimir Putin, he does not appreciate...
But was he listening to the Iranians, or was he listening, in this case, to the Saudis and other Gulf partners?
Frankly, I find it hard to believe that the Iranian government threatening the White House or threatening U.S. military bases plays that much into the calculation, just because there was already a war 6 months ago, and the Islamic Republic suffered its most humiliating military defeat in its history. The Israelis bombed, the Americans bombed, and they did one symbolic strike on Al Udeid. I think the feedback that he got from the Saudis, the Qataris, the Omanis, the Turks, that definitely is something that he listens to. He especially listens to the Saudis. But whether that means there is a temporary pause, because there's also a logistical issue and a military issue here as well. The U.S. military doesn't have the assets that it usually has in the Persian Gulf, because a lot of those ships, aircraft carriers, et cetera, have been moved to Venezuela. So we are operating kind of across multiple theaters at the moment. And if he decides in 1 week, 2 weeks, he does actually want to do something in relation to Iran, I mean, my heart really goes out to the Iranian people that thought, he was really coming to their help this week. I know a lot of people in those protests were looking to him for help. But, we saw it with Qasem Soleimani as well. I mean, Trump sometimes, he likes to lull you into a false sense of security before he hits you. And I don't think we've heard the end of this. I'd be very surprised if we have.
You don't think we've heard the end of it? And then Conway Mouet, you're sitting in, let's say, Paris, and you're watching what's going on. How do you read it? If you're the French foreign minister, the French defense minister, someone who's on the Senate's Foreign and Defense Affairs Committee, one day it's black, the next day it's white.
Well, we've got used to it. I mean, Donald Trump has been unpredictable from the start. And it can actually be an advantage that I think if the Iranian regime was not to take him seriously, they felt that they were maybe running the risks of having a strike. And therefore, I'm not convinced that the fate of the Iranian people is the priority for him, no more than the Venezuelan people were. I think he somehow, after the strike in Iran and the military operation in Venezuela, it has given him the assurance of the supremacy of the military, the American military special forces, and that he can count on them and have these incredibly striking operations that are so precise and without a bloodshed on the American side. So he's totally coherent with what he feels he can do, that he can keep threatening countries with a good reason. In the same way, Venezuela, he said, it's to protect the American people from drugs and making money for ourselves. Greenland, it's about the security of the US. And Iran, it's to protect the Iranian people. But these are just excuses that he puts forward that obviously the rest of the world will agree with. But behind that, there is indeed, and that's, I'm coming to the reading that we have, which is incredibly complex. First, the neighbors, all the neighboring countries. I don't believe that any of them, if you start, are democracies, and therefore would be great fans of seeing a democratic regime taking over in Iran. I'm not sure that there will be kind of, great support for that. Saudi Arabia and all the others are in that. But there's also the price of petrol, a petrol crisis, an escalation, because the Americans have one big interest, and it is Israel. And, if you start a war with Iran and there is an escalation or retaliation against Israel, then you put your finger into something that can get out of hand. And then having Donald Trump brought into a war that it's okay to strike from the air, but it's not okay to send military personnel on the ground. He doesn't want that. So if you take the neighbors, petrol, which is a big thing for Donald Trump, the influence of Saudi Arabia, Turkey, who was fearing mass migration in case of a big collapse of the regime. If you put all these pawns together, you see that it's a very, very complex situation, and I fully agree that it's not the end of it. There can be changes, and again, what I fear is that while the eyes of the world are on Iran, because even though there was a complete blackout, I mean, very successful communication, some pictures managed to get out. And in getting out, we saw, the extent of what was going on. That is that the people were being fired at with war, weapons of war.
So you're against military strikes, but are you in favor of stepped up sanctions? The European Union's been talking about...
I was coming to that slowly, sorry, but I was just trying to bring, because you ask, how do we view that in Paris?
Would you list the Revolutionary Guards as a terror group?
This is what we should do, of course. And there were questions to government. And unfortunately, the French minister, did not actually answer the way we wanted him to say publicly, yes, we will actually bring up more sanctions. We will target these people. Because while the eyes of the world are on Iran today, what will happen next week when we will be all centering our attention on Greenland or something else? Those people who are in prison can be tortured. Maybe they won't be hung publicly, but if they die in prison, what is the difference? So I think, what has happened there is for me, it's just a totalitarian regime that has put its population in an open prison, behind the borders, and is capable today of monitoring what they say, I mean, the cameras captured the people, the drones captured the sound and images, and people will continue being arrested now for weeks because they are totally under surveillance and they live in fear, except for those, of course, who will be demonstrating, and they have started pro-regime because of interest, because they work for the security forces and they know if there's a change of regime, they will be in big trouble. And for the people who have an interest in supporting the regime in place. But I fear what has happened should have made a major change for the population in Iran. And I'm afraid that the change may not happen now, and it will certainly not happen because there will be airstrikes or whatever. It never comes from the outside. It will come from the inside. And the hope that was given to the Iranian people to say, go out and do it, go to the end of it.
Which is what Trump said on Truth
Social. And it hasn't worked because from 150 rallies, I think a week ago, there's a couple now and maybe nothing. I mean, Donald Trump said, well, the killing has stopped. Well, he's stopping, which is not exactly the same.
All right.
So,
Negar Mortazavi, the White House spokesperson, has been speaking while we're talking. She's been saying that that 800 executions were halted in Iran because of the actions of the White House. And Trump and his team have told Iran if killing continues, there will be grave consequences. Negar, what was your reaction when you saw that post on Truth Social that Hélène Conway-Mouret was referring to, where Donald Trump told Iranians to go and occupy your institutions, help is on the way?
I think we have to see the progression. I mean, initially, the president suggested that if protesters are killed, the U.S. is locked and loaded to help. And then a few days later came the post that said Iranians have called him, have reached out, and he told the press that they're setting up meetings. So very quickly shifted from military to diplomacy. And then later came the posts and comments that they have canceled calls until the killing stops, and also sort of this third person suggestion that help is on the way, not clear from where and what kind of help. And then now we see, of course, after the deadly crackdown, a slowing down of the protests, which I would argue with the threat of the military attack, that it also intensified the crackdown, because that's usually what we see when there is a serious military threat from the outside, that the hardline, more hardline forces take over in Iran, and the crackdown intensifies in a securitized situation. And now it's very unclear, is the president trying to find sort of a way out, an off-ramp for what he created with his social posts? That's one of the debates here in Washington. Is this a ruse? Is he trying to prepare militarily? As it was said, the assets in the region are not prepared and enough for a large military operation, potentially also if the Iranians respond. The U.S. just did a regime change operation in Venezuela, and so we will have to see some of those transfer of assets for a big military option. So we don't know, is that something that's going to come? Is the president going to change his mind? Has he already changed his mind? How much of that regional diplomacy, of the pressure of U.S. Arab allies has put pressure on him? And we also know that sort of big influential voices in that MAGA movement, the anti-war wing of the Republican Party, as supporters, maybe not inside the White House, but on the outside, have also putting a lot of pressure against war. People like Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, these have very large audiences and bases within the president's supporters, and are influential, and I think listened to or cared for in the White House. So there's various different parallel issues, but I just want to reiterate, I don't really think, unfortunately, that the concern here is the lives of these protesters, freedom of speech, freedom to protest, because that's not what we've seen here in the U.S., this care for peaceful protests or the way protesters have been treated here in the U.S., especially in the past year under this administration. So I think this really is a geopolitical issue. It ties back to the kind of diplomacy or peace through strength that the president has been pushing, and potentially even aimed at bringing the Iranians back to the table for a kind of deal that this administration is aiming for.
Just very briefly on this, Amir Rashidi, we still don't quite know, strike what? What would be the targets of a military strike?
Nobody knows, but let me make a comment on the kind of, assuming there was some kind of deal between President Trump and Iranian government, and the output of deal was stopping execution. Let's for a second imagine that's completely true and we can trust it. Why restoring internet was not part of the deal? Why getting Iranian government to accept the UN fact-finding mission can send delegation in Iran and investigate what's going on and what's the real number of deaths part of the negotiation. So these are the questions that actually Iranians are questioning and asking, and nobody has any answer for it. And right now, people in Iran are kind of disappointed, to be honest with you, because they were promised by support, by help in any means. I'm not in favor of military action, but they were being promised that there would be some sort of help. And now it's just words. We are not seeing any...
On this point, Amir, for instance, making access to Elon Musk's Starlink satellite service free for people inside of Iran, that's not something that you want. I mean, how do you pressure for restored access to communications?
That was a good thing. We really appreciate it. But again, we're talking about a country with 90 million population. My assumption is there are not a lot of Starlink in Iran right now. And if this is something that, they can help, we need to get and send more inside the country. However, again, going back to the promises being made to the White House or anyone who is negotiating in the middle, having a Starlink dish in Iran is equivalent legally. The law was passed by the parliament after the 12 days war with Israel. And the law is saying having a Starlink is equivalent to running a espionage operation for Israeli and American, which is again punishing by death penalty. So going back to the promising there will be no execution, what kind of promise we talking about? What kind of people we talking about being arrested and what kind of charge, right? So this is much more complicated than just saying, yeah, I was promised, they told me there would be no execution. No, I cannot believe it. Again, as an Iranian, living in Iran, working on human rights for a long time, digital rights, I cannot believe anything being promised by Iranian government.
And Hélène Conway-Mouret, there was the French foreign minister this week who said he was looking into options to making Eutelsat satellite terminals, getting them into Iran to help the citizens. Again, is that a drop in the ocean, as was described there by Amir, the way Starlink satellite systems are a drop in the ocean?
Well, I think it's a good move, but at the same time, we have seen that the Iranian regime was capable of blocking out. It was a total blackout that happened. So whether it's Starlink or the European communication system, I don't know if the
Starlink's
technology,
can be jammed.
but if the technology, because the Russians are working on that, and of course Europe is of great interest to the Russians, as you know, at the moment, will be obviously developing the technology to help blocking out, whatever we're using as well, because it's kind of in parallel. But there's just one point I would like to make and hear the experts, because I'm not from Iran. But the question that we have is that if there was a leader who could actually bring together these various movements, because it started there, the riots started on the price of food and the inflation and so on.
The merchants, the bozos.
But yes, but on that, the students, women movements, a lot of movements for all different reasons came and made this overall, kind of uprising that we saw. But I think it will make it much easier if there was a leadership that could actually bring these movements together and maybe be helped to indeed replace the regime in place. Because at the moment, there's nobody that, and maybe there is, but we don't know that person, and it should maybe be somebody out of Iran, but somebody who's actually living in the country and actually knows what is happening, is, living the reality of the people there, and the fact that Iran, under 40 years, has been, under this kind of iron shield, So I'd like to know if there is hope that indeed we could have somebody, not the Shah's son, or somebody say, oh yeah, it could be him. No, somebody who really can carry that and carry the people of Iran.
So,
it's a fantastic people forward.
Payman Azmoudeh, if you look at neighboring Syria, you have two examples. You had first, there was this sort of Syrian government in exile, and it tried to work. For years, then there were rivalries that didn't go very far. Then there was a leader who was groomed by Turkey, and when the regime was ripe for falling, in he swept. Which model would work better when it comes to Iran?
I am really glad that you brought up the example of Syria, because it's something that I wanted to bring up. Just one word about the conversation we were just having about diplomacy and a deal and what kind of help and what kind of commitments they can get from the Iranian government. I just feel like the discussion that we're having is not really at the level of the atrocity that we just witnessed. So if you look at the Syrian revolution, and if you ask Syrians, activists, people who lived through that war and lived through that crisis, that are watching what's happening in Iran now, the death toll for the first year of the Syrian revolution, so the whole of 2011, was less than 8,000 people. It was 7,800 people, about. The lowest realistic estimates we have of how many people were just murdered in Iran over the course of 3 days is 12,000 people. And based on the reports that we're getting now over the last couple of days, it's probably closer to 20,000. It might be more. We may never know. In 2019, when they cracked down and they killed...
Yesterday, we had a conservative estimate of 3,400.
Those are the official estimates.
The official, multiplied by 3.
The government...
They were telling us this was a Norwegian human rights group, and they were telling us it was a conservative estimate. It was what they could verify.
Exactly, because they have a process for verifying. And when they can actually reach the families and get documentation and confirm the specific identity of the person who was killed. But when you listen to the testimony of the people who were at Kahrizak, so where all those body bags were dumped, and we saw the images over the last couple of days, that is every bit as horrific as what we saw from Khan Sheikhoun and Ghouta and the worst atrocities of the Syrian civil war. That is on the same level. And it's not surprising because it's the same people. This is the same government that basically managed Bashar al-Assad's war for him. This is the same government that was basically ruling Syria as a proxy for most of that conflict. They're applying the same playbook in Iran that they developed in Syria. And so for me, for us to talk about negotiating with this government, making a deal with this government, treating this government as if it's still a normal situation, as if we were still talking to them 3 weeks ago, that's just beyond the pale. I can't really see what there is to negotiate at this point on that level. If we're not treating them like we treated Bashar al-Assad, I don't really see what we're doing.
And regarding Senator Conway-Mouret's question of what do you do? The leaderless movements, we've seen their limits. What kind of a leader do you have? Is it someone who's groomed from abroad, or is there some kind of Iranians in exile who agree amongst themselves?
So the first point I will make on this is that Iran is an extremely diverse country. So it's 90 million people, but it's 90 million people who speak different languages, have different religious backgrounds. Yes, it's majority Persian. Yes, it's majority Shia Muslim. But there are a lot of different elements of that society. And the diaspora, we are, maybe 8 million people. There are different estimates, but it's a large diaspora with a lot of money, a lot of resources that has never really managed to organize itself effectively on behalf of the people back home. There are a lot of reasons for that. I don't really want to get into an hour-long lecture about that. But Madame la Sénatrice mentioned, for example, Reza Pahlavi. I think it is a mistake to discount him like that and say that he does not speak for anyone. Now, he might not speak
I didn't say that.
Right.
I just said that it was just taken out of the hat as if there is nobody else. And I'm just asking the question: are there political leaders today?
Let me make this clear for our viewers. Before the internet was cut a week ago, more and more social media posts from the protests featured chants supporting Reza Pahlavi, the son of the late Shah of Iran, whose brutal legacy in its own right has long been discredited inside the country. A regular at conservative gatherings like CPAC, the 65-year-old Pahlavi reportedly meeting with Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, over the weekend. News site Axios doesn't really go into specifics, but it doesn't sound like the meeting went well, not in light of Trump's comments about the Shah in an interview on Wednesday with the Reuters news agency. In that interview, he said, "He seems very nice, but I don't know how he'd play within his own country, and we really aren't up to that point yet." Amir Rashidi, your organization, the Mian Group, put out a report on January 7th that broke down the slogans that you analyzed from social media. It makes for interesting reading because at the time it was only a minority portion. Let's see if I have my notes here straight, which were chanting slogans in favor of Reza Pahlavi. It's something like 15%. That was January 7th. You put out the report. Do you think those numbers went up, perhaps, after you did that study?
So let's look what happened. People in the street were calling for Reza Pahlavi. We respond to them, and they also respond to Reza Pahlavi. That's the reality, like it or not. I'm not in favor of monarchy or anything like that, but we cannot change this. This is the reality. How many of people are supporting? I don't know. It's very difficult to, do the study, do the polling and things like that. But I think it's very, very clear for everyone that it started from people inside the country. They were calling for him. He responded to the call, and wherever he put the finger, showed the finger, people follow him in the street. And as a result, the Iranian government literally killed all of them. And here we are in a position that, you don't know where you can go. You were being promised by help, but nothing were delivered.
Nothing was delivered. Negar Mortazavi, your thoughts on Reza Pahlavi's name coming up so much in conversation?
Well, there's certainly name recognition. This is a family. His grandfather, his father ruled over Iran. And big part of the population lived through that era. They still remember it. Nobody else has that kind of name recognition in Iran. There's also a lack of alternative. It was discussed about activists inside Iran. There's no one inside Iran who has shown leadership capacity, network building, and movement building that the regime allows for them to do it freely. Whoever has shown any semblance of leadership and movement building and support will be either put under house arrest or banned from working, from activity, or detained. They're either in prison or forced to leave the country. So it's very difficult when there's no room for that kind of alternative or opposition inside the country. But I think President Trump's comments are important. It sounds like, if we think about the Venezuela model, who thought Maria Machado dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize to President Trump? And I think the thinking was that if regime change does happen by the U.S. in Venezuela, that it would be her. And we see immediately that essentially they decapitate or take out the top person and let the rest of the system, number two and the others, continue. And he said similar comments about her. She's a very nice lady, but, I don't think this is the right person for the job. And it sounds like he's also approaching Reza Pahlavi like that. He's refused to meet him publicly, and now he's even questioning his ability to be a leader or the popularity inside the country. And I think reading between the lines, not even clear if he's prepared or implying that he wants to engage in that kind of a regime change that then would bring someone from the outside to take over. Because without this kind of hard power, I'm not sure if that model is even possible. and the president has said on the record last week that he doesn't want to commit boots on the ground. So we're not looking at an Iraq or Afghanistan model. So I think with U.S. military, it would probably be, if it's a kinetic option, it would be bombing of certain regime strongholds, IRGC, maybe besieged sites, or something more sustained, more of a sort of a Libya model, which is one reason why the neighbors have been really worried and scared and activated.
Ellen Conway-Mouret, should the Europeans be supporting a leader from abroad, or should they be militating for regime change? Or, as Negar just pointed out, if you don't want to put boots on the ground, it's hard to do that.
The problem is that when you have a regime such as the one of the mullah in Iran, there's no opposition that can actually exist. It is crushed. People are put into prison, eliminated, corrupted, whatever way.
Should France break diplomatic relations with Iran?
So therefore, it is very difficult to feel
diplomatic relations with Iran?
Well, not France. I mean, Europe, yes, should do something. I mean, we're talking about Donald Trump as the president of a company who is hiring or not director general, of the company. He likes the person, he doesn't like the person. It's like an interview, the person is nice, but don't think she can do the job, so we might look for somebody else. But I mean, what world are we in today that we delegate to the one leader, okay, the United States of America, but it's not the only country in the world, the function to appoint leaders in other countries, maybe to serve the American interest, and that would be, this is what we're discussing here, Should this person be to the liking of Donald Trump, and therefore he should be appointed? Don't we believe it's really absolutely ridiculous the way we're kind of looking at the world? We're talking about 90 million people who aspire to have a different life. Now, the question is, can it be organized with a leadership that will actually bring that change, and how can it actually concentrate all these different movements within the country? And I know it's a very complex country, but I think in the region, every country is complex, and we have to, that's why in Europe, we have to have a thinking of, you do it the way it should be done, because we cannot apply the way we would be doing it, because it's just different. Impose it from, so when you say yes, Europe should put pressure, but Europe or France can only entice a change to the liking of the people and stop the killings of the people, the massacres, and put pressure on the regime to stop doing it. But from the outside, it's very difficult when you have this total blockage of everything.
Right, and the blockage is, of course, domestic for the Iranians. With each movement, the regime hones its skills at internet shutdowns, this time through its National Information Network. Iran's scheme by which the government could still function during a blackout also got knocked offline with this communications cut, as you put it, Amir Rashidi. So let me ask you on this very briefly, because we're out of time. How skilled is the Islamic Republic now at shutting down the communications after this week, and how will protesters organize themselves accordingly?
First, quickly back to the slogans. I think you should add those slogans that calling for overthrowing the government to the base of Pahlavi. That's I think the most accurate way of looking at it. But look, the Iranian government, they have developed and create something that you cannot find anything like that anywhere. So if you want, this is my recommendation for European government and any other government. If you want, that won't be an issue anywhere else. You need to find a solution for what's happening in Iran in terms of internet shutdown. Right now, we're talking about Iran. We are working on a report. We haven't published it yet. Hopefully, in the coming days, we're going to publish it. Iran is exporting this technology to Russia and some countries in Africa. So imagine if this kind of technology, so sophisticated, being exported, and by the way, through a proxy company in Europe, in Germany, and some other European country, being exported to Russia, being exported to Africa. So
Right, so
if
the
for
danger-
whatever reason you haven't respond for what's happening in Iran right now, you need to think about it tomorrow in other countries, in other authoritarian countries.
That'll be the final word. Amir Rashidi, something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us from Turin. I want to thank Negar Mortazavi in Washington, Hélène Conway, Mouret Peyman Azmoudeh. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.